I was originally asked to talk about one of these things, but actually some people here already heard me on that thing, so I'm going to talk about two other things as well, which means it's going to be it's a bit of a miscellany, but I'm rolling it together under this heading of 24/7 Latin because there's five basic problems which we face, and I think they've all come up already today. Sorry, my laser pointer's in my jacket, which is just a sort of the first is that we have very little contact time with our students. Anyone who's learning a language, and of course, one of the key things you should be doing if you're teaching classical language is to have a language of your own on the go, so you can observe yourself as a language learner, just to get into Japanese or Russian or something and just see what tactics you develop as a language learner. Because one of the things that you quickly realise is that language learning is a 24/7 activity. Only over the course of a term, and often there's going to be an entire vacation between their last class and their exam, and there's going to be an entire summer between that exam and the next year's language. What we call at Royal Holloway the Great Forgetting. And they will come back at the beginning of the second year, and they will no longer know what the ablative is, or sometimes they will no longer know what a noun is. So these contact gaps need bridging somehow. You need to turn 3 hours a week in a classroom into a 24/7 learning experience. Feedback latency is the problem of having to give students manual feedback on their learning. The standard pattern that we all grew up with is that you give them homework, you collect it in, you take it out at home after the class, you mark it, you give it back to the next one. That's at least a week of delay between the students doing the work and then finding out whether they got it right. And that's what, if there's one reason we need online tools, that's it. Third is that most of the things we give students to do is no fun whatever. There is no play, there's no joy, there's no spark about it. It's relentless, mindless, brainless, drilling kinds of exercise. It just sucks all the things we love about classical languages out of the learning of them in the first place. But most importantly, and this really segues in from what Alison was saying, our tools are completely broken. I mean, anyone who has tried to work in the crappy VLEs we are forced to use by our institutions knows that they are absolutely soul-destroying. You can just feel the will to live being sucked out of the students' souls through their fingers as they type. How do you think Blackboard's bad? You should try Moodle. My God, Moodle 2. Moodle 2 broke HTML. How do you break HTML? We had hundreds of pages beautifully hyperlinked. They got rid of directory structure. Oh, very clever. Nothing can link to anything anymore. And above all, we have zero resources. We don't have, as Alison was more politely saying, we don't have 10 grand to throw around. We have our own non-existent spare time, no money, no technical support, and somehow we have to teach 50 kids Latin in 2 terms. So how are we going to do it? Well, I'm not going to talk about that first. I'm going to talk about what we do with our broken tools, first of all. This is where I have to do a lot of kind of, let's try this, a lot of switching around between different apps here. Let me start with what you can do in a VLE. There is one and only one thing that Moodle is actually good for, and it's such a hidden feature. Blackboard has something similar, but I've never worked in Blackboard, so I'm just going to talk about how you do it in Moodle. It's such a well-hidden feature that if you look at, for example, the book on Moodle quiz tools, it doesn't mention it at all. But it is absolutely the one thing that Moodle can do that almost justifies its existence. What you can do in Moodle is use something called the gift quiz format to square the circle of how you allow students to enter translations of Latin to English or English into Latin sentences when there are so many possibilities for what they could enter. Moodle is a bit crude in the way that its quiz formats work, but one thing that you can train it to do is to mark translations automatically and to give instant feedback. And if you can do that, then a large part of your contact gap problem is gone. The only way to make it work, and some of these things have already come up, is that you do need to have a relatively agreed lexicon, not in the physical sense, but in the semantic sense. And in practice, that does mean agreeing that everyone is going to be using the same dictionary. It happens that for our course, the dictionary is actually integrated into the course. We use the Pocket Oxford Latin Dictionary, though that too is a broken tool, which I don't think is any of James Morwood's fault. It's just that the subsequent editions of it are increasingly corrupt. I mean, the latest edition has left out locus by accident, and dexter, and a few other words that you might need from time to time. And it's just a disaster. But everything else is worse. I mean, one of the things we all know about teaching Latin is that there are no good student-level dictionaries. You can have multiple possible translations of any given word, as long as you make sure you include somewhere the first entry in the dictionary amongst your possibilities. I'll show you how this works in a second. You do need to have a convention that you're going to follow the structure of the Latin as closely as you can without turning it into sort of gibberish translation-ese. And one of the conventions which is very good to inculcate in students is that you mirror the punctuation of the sentence you're translating in your translation, because that also constrains the number of possible alternatives. And if you've got third-person verbs with non-expressed subjects, allow he as the default, forget about the she's and the it's unless they're absolutely necessary. You have to get rid of some of the nuances like contracted verb forms, it's or it is, the variation between the present continuous and the present simple in English, the past perfect and the aorist in English. But if you work within those limitations, you can actually do something quite robust. Here's an example. This is from our own in-house text, which is Jonathan Powell's VVV. And here's a little exercise, very straightforward bit of sentence translation. You might look at that and think, well, there's no way on earth that all the possible translations of that could actually be stored in a computer and recognised correctly when a student gets them. But what you can do in Moodle, I had to invent my own syntax for this, but it's a very simple syntax, is you can put all the alternatives. This isn't a Moodle feature, this is me. I'll show you how you do this in a second. If you have all the alternatives in vertical lines separated curly bracket groups, and anything that can't be done in a single version you can have in multiple versions, then all you need to do is to run a very simple couple of macros. I say they're simple. I mean, actually, this is very simple. These are just grep, search, and replace expressions, apart from this little loop here. This is the dialect used in an old text editor called Quedem, which is the ancestor of Nisus, if you use that on your Mac. And you could certainly do this in Nisus, no problem. What it does is it unpacks the syntax, and then it converts into this native Moodle gift format. And what you end up with is a combinatorial set of all the possible answers that you've typed in like that and they will all be stored in Moodle, and it will recognise whichever one of those possible variants the student enters. Now, you might like to think, well, how many of them is that actually going to be? How many possible answers might there be to these, whatever it is, 12 sentences? Well, the answer is, if I can just find it, so this is where I have to, yeah, there we go. This is the gift file that emerges, and you can see, you know, it has automatically generated. I did have I'm and I am as alternatives. It's automatically generated all the possible translations of all of these, of which there are. Let's see in the end. 12,846. Moodle is very bad at a lot of things, but my God, it's difficult to break. And you can upload that file with your 12,846 possible answers, and every one of them will be recognised, and the student will get instant feedback on whether their particular possible translation is marked correctly. So, you know, it's a way of using a broken tool to do something which seems miraculous, and I've been fairly brisk about the technicalities of it. But I can certainly go through it at great leisure. I want to move on to talk about something else that we do. This is going to be briefer, but here's our actual. It's logged me out. How do I do this without showing my?
Why are you?
No, it's all right. I did that on purpose.
Oh, I know. It's
One of the things that we do is because the other problem that you have with the fact that your time with the students is so limited is that it's really difficult to check how much of the stuff that they need to memorise they're memorising. And vocabulary, of course, is the great sort of test case of that. And although I'm sure this is a lesson in sucking eggs to your granny from many here, one of the things that I think we do have going for us is that vocabulary learning is actually an absolute piece of piddle. It's the one thing that there is no excuse for not doing well and efficiently and fun. And all you need to do, I mean, vocabulary learning is such a simple business if you do it right. All you need to do is to get on their phones. This is actually the key to 24/7 Latin. Ultimately, they're not. I mean, actually, one of the things you notice from all these kind of Big Brother facilities that are there in VLEs. You can see when students are spending time online and the bizarre hours and the bizarre lengths of time that they sometimes spend at 4 a.m. Going through their sentences. But ultimately, you want to be on the one electronic device that they are carrying around with them everywhere they go, including to the toilet, to the pub, standing around on Egham Station, wondering whether there's another body under a train, at the supermarket queue, and they're always fiddling with their phone. And vocabulary learning is one of the things that you could always get on their phone, and it's a very, very straightforward process. What you need to do is to combine repetition spacing with frequency lists. And I mean, this is such a no-brainer that I almost feel that I'm insulting you by talking about it. But spaced repetition, as I'm sure you're aware, let's go back to that one, is a system originally devised by the German educational psychologist Sebastian Leitner in the 70s. His famous book, So lernt man lernen, How to Learn, applied educational psychology leads to success, leads to results. And it was originally a physical flashcard system under which you would have 5 compartments in a sorting card file, and each of these compartments would have an item for memorization on it. And every time you get one right, you move it back a compartment. Every time you get one wrong, you move it forward a compartment, and you start from the front and you work to the back. And so what's happening is that the deck of cards, the box of cards, is constantly being resorted in the order of difficulty that you're experiencing with each with each item. And for a long time now, there have been computerized implementations of this. The biggest of them for a long time, but some of them now the biggest of them, and still in many ways the best, was SuperMemo. I used to I learned kanji in 5 months in SuperMemo. It was wonderful, but it's kind of abandonware now. One of the crucial things if you want to get on their phones is that you need to be cross-platform. Ideally, you need to have cloud synchronization between desktop and multiple phones. There are all kinds of constraints. We use Anki, which is unsatisfactory in some ways because it's it has this bizarre business model under which it's free on all platforms except Apple, except iOS. It's free on Mac desktop, and it costs £17.49, which no student is ever going to spend on that. But you can still use the online version. So we go with that because it has this very because it simply covers all the platforms. So Mozine is free, but there's no iOS version, so that screws half your students' phones, unfortunately. My daughter brushed aside all of the above. She really likes Sticky Study, because I'll show you what Sticky Study does. Sticky Study is this is the Athanasde vocabulary. You can actually see all the flashcards, and they gradually turn from red to green as you memorize them successfully. But I mean, Anki, I think, is the one I would recommend if you don't mind the. Here's just an example of how it works. This is the. Sorry, I should make it a bit bigger, but what I've done here is to take the vocabulary in our course text, or the 700 most important words in our course text, and to sort them according to an initial algorithm of how frequent they are and where they come in the course. And so they start with some, they go on to common little words. And you can see at the bottom here, there are 3 buttons. If you didn't remember that word at all before you tapped it to get the answer, then you press the left-hand one, and that will tell you how long it'll be till the next time it comes up in one of your daily tests. If you found it really easy and you got it at once, you do the right hand one. If it's somewhere in the middle, then use the middle button, and they'll very automatically get sorted into the order of difficulty. But the thing that is a problem with most of the free decks out there is that they don't use the second great tool of vocabulary learning, which is frequency lists. Because I'm sure everybody knows about Zipf's law. If you don't, I'm sure I had a Wikipedia entry loaded up. Zipf's law is the law that, here we go, I'll just, oops, so I just want to expand the text a bit. Which one let me do? Ooh, didn't like that. Right again. Well, Zipf's law is simply the law that the frequency of a word in texts is going to be, in a natural language corpus, is going to be proportional. Sorry, I have to find this. There we go. Proportional to. There's a better form of words. Given some corpus of natural language utterances, the frequency of any word is inversely proportional to its rank in a frequency table. And what that means is it's the kind of 80-20 rule that 80% of the words in any text will be only kind of 20% of the actual linguistic corpus. But in fact, it's a much lower number than that. And there's this very useful article by Wilfred Major, who's done a lot of work on this. Oh, I've just crashed the whole thing. But it's down in your handout. I was just going to show you this bit where he talks about the number of words in Latin and in Greek that you need to learn in order to be able to read 50 or 80% of the text of the text you're likely to encounter. And the figure for Greek is unusually low. I mean, for most languages, it's between 1,000 and 2,000 words to read 80% of text. For Latin, it's something like 1,800 words, if I remember right. For Greek, it's I think as low as about 1,100. The core vocabulary for Greek is remarkably efficient. But in either case, the thing you need to do with a spaced repetition deck is start with the words they're going to be seeing all the time. And I put on the handout an assortment of resources that you can oh dear, it's completely lost all my. Well, this is Major's article. Here we go. The number of lemmas, which typically generate 80% of a text. In English, actually it's over 2,000 words. Greek, fewer than 1,100. So if you can get them to learn 1,000 Greek words, they will be able to read 80% of any Greek text. Do it in order, because there's a lot of instant gratification in this. If you see that the words you're learning early are actually going to be turning up a lot, then it gets you into the habit of vocabulary learning. And as I say, you can do it in the supermarket queue, you can do it on the toilet, you can do it while waiting for serving in the pub, you can do it all the time. Okay, third thing, I've got 5 more minutes from when in my time slot. So the third thing I'm going to do, and this is where I think I do have to switch cables a bit, is to push the boat out a bit. Because ultimately, there's a limit to what you can do with existing tools out there. I mean, there are some very good things for classical languages. I'm sure everyone's got their students using Paul Hudson's SPQR, which has a very good verb training grammar module. Back in the 90s, there was a product that came out called Real Basic, which was terribly exciting at the time. It allowed you to compile applications for multiple platforms from the same code base in an integrated development environment So for the first time, it was possible for any idiot to do something really remarkable happened about a year ago. An Edinburgh company called Runtime Revolution, runrev.com, raised some Kickstarter cash to release for free their development environment, which is actually, for those of us who have been alive long enough, which is actually what in another life used to be HyperCard, but brought into the future and sort of kept up to date with things that today's devices and today's systems can do, they have released a community edition of LiveCode, which basically allows any idiot to roll their own apps and compile them for anything, not just for desktop platforms, but for Android and crucially for iOS, although you have to go through Xcode to do that. And I just thought I'd give you a little demonstration of the kind of thing you can throw together in no time at all. And again, I'm sorry that we can't, if you find this difficult to see. This is really just a proof of concept thing. This is, I was interested, I've long been interested in Dexter Hoyos's fluent Latin system, under which you're learning to read Latin in left to right order as opposed to finding the verb and treating it all as a kind of Sudoku. And one really interesting exercise, and I tried this out on my daughter who's doing A-level Latin, in fact I wrote it for her, is to take, this is Deoficies 2, and all I've done is I've put all the sentences in Deoficies 2 into this app, and it will give you a choice of 3 options as to what the next word in the sentence is. I don't know if you can see this. It starts off with a sed, and we have the option of hoc, toto, and day, and I reckon day is going to be the next one. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong tool here. I'm still in there. I can show you the code for this, actually. The code is extremely simple. That's pretty much all there is to it. Sorry, actually, there is one other little bit of code, but if I just go to the... I reckon it's going to be day. No! Okay. No, okay, I'm not doing well here. And you can see my score is being decremented as I go. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not sure what you learned by this, but it took less than an hour to chuck this together. And there is this free tool out there which will let you do this kind of stuff and just make it for your students. You can go crazy. I mean, one of the other things that I've done is again, you can do this very, very quickly. I'll in the show and tell bit, I'll do a little demo of this if you like. So you can put together a Socrates chatbot, which is probably the most maddening conversation you will ever have. And the ability is there to create your own stuff on your own time, get it on their phones, and just have them mess with it. It's actually not necessary to have all the wonderful resources that you do. You can just hack this stuff on the train home from Egham. And I think it is very, very important that we actually find a way to bring language learning into that 24/7 world, onto the devices that they actually have with them every minute of their waking and sometimes sleeping lives. I will now shut up.